Hi, I'm Kaylin Thornton with Rocky Mountain Clay. Today we're going to talk about reclaiming clay, recycling clay that maybe didn't work out on a previous project. And as long as the clay hasn't already been fired, you can reuse it even if it's completely dry. I'm going to show you a few ways I do it in my own classroom. These are great techniques to use in your own classroom if you're another teacher, or in your own studio. Save some money, reuse some clay. It's going to be fun. Recycling clay can happen in a lot of different ways. One really popular but more expensive way is to get a machine like this. This is called a pug mill. It mixes the clay for you. Some of them even have a vacuum attached that will take the air out of it for you. This is actually just a small version of how clay is made in the factory. They're great machines, but like I said, they are expensive. So if you don't have access to a pug mill, you can do some old-fashioned recycling techniques, which could involve a plaster table like this. And below this plaster table is actually concrete. And concrete would work as also, it's just not as porous as plaster is, and it doesn't kind of seek that moisture that plaster does as well. So if you have your choice, or you can pour your own, do plaster, but concrete would also work. When you're recycling clay, it kind of depends on what stage you're at. If it's a piece that you just threw from the wheel and it didn't work out, most of the time you can smash that flat on a plaster table or a concrete table and just let it dry out a little bit before you can re-wedge it. But if you have old clay like this is just dry pots that didn't work out so well, you can recycle these kind of from start to finish, starting with really dry clay. So this is greenware, really dry, easy to break, no water content there. And honestly, the drier the better in this case. And then from that point, as you break it up into your small pieces, you can add that to a bucket. Your amount of clay that you use on a regular basis could determine the size of your bucket. For example, if you use a lot of clay, you could use a jumbo trash can like this. That is full of clay, and eventually, maybe, hopefully someday, I can get to the bottom of that. I might be 100 years old first. But you can let your clay soak in a big trash can like this. If you're working in a small studio setting, you have the option of just using regular buckets, such as this one here that is full of clay that was completely dry, and I add water to it, let it soak overnight, and as it soaks, it turns into more of a really wet sand texture. And I'll show you here. Pardon the shaky camera. Okay, but this is the consistency we're looking for. Okay, it's, like I said, it's almost like you just scooped up a bunch of really sticky sand. Okay, that we will scoop out of this bucket, dump the water, scoop the clay out of the bucket, and then we're going to spread that on our plaster wedging table. All right, so we got the clay spread out here on the plaster table. I just scoop it out of the bucket with my hands. It's not super pleasant. I mean, it's kind of like playing in mud. So, sort of fun, I guess. But I just scoop it out with my hands, and I spread it out. This is about an inch thick on that plaster table. Now, if you're in your own studio and you have time, you could spread this even thinner. Give it probably 5 hours or so, and you should be able to roll this up just with a scraper of some kind. I use one like this, except for mine's broken. Okay, but use a scraper of some kind. Scrape it up, roll it up, and then wedge it, and you should be good to use this. What a lot of potters will do instead, just so they can avoid little chunkies in their clay, is blend this up and make slip out of it, really thick slip, and then spread slip out on their plaster table or their concrete table. It takes a little longer to dry, but the consistency is actually much nicer. So it's all about if you have time or not, and a good mixer, a mixing bit, or a big blender. So what I can do, so this being in my classroom, what I'll do tonight is I'll leave this uncovered just like this, and I'll come back in the morning, and the consistency should be perfect for me to scrape this up and either wedge it, depending on how quickly we need it, or throw it in the pug mill if you do have a pug mill. Okay, so spread your clay out, maybe about an inch thick. The thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry out. If you're worried about it drying out, You could put some bags over the top of it, just kind of set them over the top like a blanket, and then when you come in the morning, uncover, give it about an hour, and it should be perfect consistency for wedging. And you should be good to go. All right, it's been about 17 hours, so overnight. And this is that clay that I set out yesterday. And as you can see, it is much more squishy and ready to be wedged. So I would peel this up. Roll that into balls and pieces, wedge it up, and we're good to go. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Just a couple reminders. The drier your clay is when you start the recycling process, I think the better. It really soaks up that water, the clay breaks apart really nicely, and it smooths out on your table. I think a little more evenly. You don't get a lot of chunks in your recycled clay that way. It also makes really good slip if you're using a blender or a hand blender to do that. I just think it's the way the clay breaks apart from that stage just makes for really nice slip. Last thing, just pay attention to the humidity in your room. If it's really dry, like it is here in Colorado, your clay's going to dry out a lot faster. So pay attention. You might want to come out and check it a few times. You can also come out and check it if the top is really squishy, but the bottom is a little more firm. You can flip that over like a pancake and let it dry for just a little bit longer before you re-wedge that and reuse it. I think that's all I got. We'll see you next time.